the arrow keys.
Fantastic. Good morning. Hello, thanks. I know I'm the last thing standing between you and coffee, so although I'm talking about the whole of marine, I will try and keep it as brief as possible. I'd like to start with a confession. I'm a pedant. I'm a pedant about data and I'm a pedant about grammar, so when I saw the title of this conference being Data, What Is It Good For, I had a little shudder to myself. Data are, because it's plural. But anyway, as I say, limited time. I'm going to use another XKCD cartoon because they're fantastic at communicating science issues. I don't know how legible that is. Sometimes that's the experience you get as a marine person at an NBN event. You can imagine that palm tree has had, so many surveys and studies done on it, but there's a whole load of marine stuff going on that people aren't always aware of. There's no doubt there's challenging terrestrial environments to work in as well, but I think marine presents some unique things, unique challenges, and I'm going to cover some of those today, some of the differences and also some of the similarities. That said, the deserved recognition last night at the awards for Sea Search makes me eat my words a bit. So, marine does get a flag waved at the NBN more and more regularly now. So to tackle the differences, I thought that the best way to do it would be in the context of the NBN data flow pathway that hopefully you're all familiar with. So there's a number of areas that where there's significant differences, and they're the ones that I'm going to touch on, and that's around the recording and collection, the curation to do with standards and metadata, and the aggregation, which is to do with the online mapping and the Atlas side of things that we heard a little bit about following the workshops yesterday. So just a bit sort of generally about why marine are different. There's 35 phyla in the marine environment compared to 15 terrestrially. But that said, the marine environment is actually much less diverse. There's less than 200,000 species in the marine. Those habitats, though, that we find tend to be animal dominated. Light doesn't penetrate the depths. You get less plant growth. So you get fantastic brittle starbreads like the illustration image there. I think you could argue we have more extreme and more varied ecological pressures in the marine environment. You have turbidity, you have waves, you have the tidal regimes, and obviously, even in the intertidal, that's still pretty extreme. We have natural and extensive connectivity. There's no man-made structures to restrict the movement of larvae or migration patterns. You have roads, no bridges, or very few man-made structures. And those also potentially limits the movement of pollutants and impacts as well. And generally the knowledge is poor, the marine knowledge. I mean, around the coastal zone, it's not bad, it's pretty good. But even inshore, there's large areas that are still sort of unsurveyed and unmapped in any detail, although, like I say, initiatives like Sea Search, like the BioBlitzes that we run from the MBA, are starting to fill in some of those gaps and increase our knowledge. So here's a typical terrestrial survey going on. I mean, it looks lovely, doesn't it? You're in the sunshine, probably stop and have a picnic halfway through. That's what all terrestrial surveys are like, obviously, from a marine perspective. If you compare that methodology to what's required to do a similar survey in the marine environment, just getting there is a challenge. You've got to get a boat, you've got to have all the dive equipment, you're limited in the time you can spend doing the work. So the cost and effort is significantly more. And that might explain why I think there's only something like 3%, 4% of the data on the Atlas are marine. But even in the intertidal, you're limited by time, you're limited by the environment. It's not an easy area to work in. So just the actual act of collecting marine data, it's expensive, it's complex, it's dangerous in a lot of cases. And I'm exaggerating for effect, and I don't want to belittle the efforts and the work that go on in the terrestrial environment. So moving on to curation now, to do with the description of the data, the metadata, the standards, and the archiving that goes on. We are incredibly fortunate in the marine environment to have a partnership within the UK called the Marine Environmental Data and Information Network, of which we at the MBA host the biodiversity side of it, the Marine Biodiversity Archive. This is a framework for standardising access to marine environmental data, and that includes the physical and chemical parameters, the bathymetry, the geology, the meteorological effects, the human impacts, the heritage side of things, and we're all working together in a big partnership to link all those environmental variables and factors together. And through that partnership, we've developed a standard metadata discovery metadata standard, which is basically an enhancement of the UK Gemini 1 with marine-specific keywords and descriptions. And there's also a suite of data guidelines to standardize the flow of data from those people generating it to the archive centres. And the sort of the mantra that's used within, or the mission statement is measure once and use many times. And I think that's something that's common to all of us that we want to aim for. But I don't want to, what we're doing at the UK level isn't just done in isolation. We're working with global standards. And again, Marine has got its act together. I'm quite proud to be part of the marine community, to sort of hold my hand up and say we've done a pretty good job of standardising things. We have the British Oceanographic Data Centre vocabularies, which are used globally to make sure people are using the same terms to refer to data parameters that are being collected. And this is across all environmental variables. And we have a fantastic resource called WORMS, the World Register of Marine Species, which is the taxonomic standard for the whole of the world for marine species. And that's supported by a range of editors and experts. And we have a similar standard that's not quite as well known, but deserves sort of more promotion and to be used more widely, called marine regions, which again is a standard set of terms for describing marine spatial areas at different resolutions. And the aggregator for marine biological data, marine biodiversity data, globally in OBIS, the Ocean Biogeographic Information System. So we've joined up very well, both at the national scale and globally as well. There's a slight difference again in the standards. So within MBN and has adopted the GBIF Darwin Core Standard through the new Atlas. Within the OBIS community, there's a slight extension to this, which is still compatible with the standard, but there's something called the OBIS Environmental Data Schema, which allows us to expand the traditional STAR schema to put a more hierarchical approach in place, describing traits and values related to species, and also capturing environmental parameters at the sample and survey level. So moving swiftly through this, I appreciate this is a whistle-stop tour, onto the aggregation and then the gateway, so the Atlas. That's always going to be one. So this is the typical, search results that you would get, and you'd zoom in and you'd get sort of a little bit more detail. And you're thinking, okay, that's good. I can put those records in context. Oh, I've got a dot on a blue rectangle. So that really doesn't tell me very much at all. If I compare that to something for on land, I can infer habitats from that. I can infer human impacts from that. If I do the same a satellite imagery for marine, sorry, we don't have the imagery available. So the ideal world is UK Hydrographic Office charts. These give you the same level of detail you get from an OS map for the marine, essentially. It gives you depth and that sort of level of information. But because of licensing restrictions, these aren't available. They are available, but it would be prohibitively expensive to get UK coverage. We have a European project called eModNet, European Marine Observation and Data Network, and they're pulling together standardized access to different data products across Europe. So eModNet bathymetry is one of these projects, and this information is available for free. You can get this bathymetry data. We can include this in the Atlas, and that would be so incredibly beneficial. It isn't as good a resolution as we'd hoped for, but to give context to those marine records, that's a fantastic first step. And companies like OceanWise are also taking this information, enhancing it, and are going to be releasing it into the public domain. So the information is out there. We have habitat information as well. It'd be fantastic to put marine habitats data on there. This is from eModNet Seabird Habitats project. And this is the broad and medium scale habitats that we have from surveys. This is actual survey data. So this is Bristol Channel, even in this area, it's incredibly well studied. There's huge amounts of work going on, but there is still big gaps. So there's model data available from EUCMAP, and we get much better coverage and pretty sort of fine level of detail. But then when you put the confidence layer on top, yellow is medium, orange is low. Again, this is a fantastically well-studied area, but the confidence we have in the data that's out there isn't good. So yeah, I don't think any of these differences are insurmountable. And I say we're working in the marine domain and collaborating and pushing things forward. And what I don't want to do, as I said, is perpetuate a marine and terrestrial them and us scenario. We all face the same challenges: funding, especially time series, the lack of taxonomic skills and expertise, and data protectionism, the lack of free and open data. And in the community we have in this room, we have the right people to tackle some of these challenges. So I think there's small improvements we can make, and we highlighted those in the workshop, marine workshop yesterday, and I think they will make massive benefits to the marine community and their engagement. So I just want to finish off saying thank you, but what we actually need is a continued dialogue. We've got organisations involved in marine and the expertise that we have in the MBN community, and if we work together, I think we can tackle this and solve these problems together. Thank you.